All right, so we're on now. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you. My name is Viktor Kipiani. I'm the chairman for the Geocase, which is the Tbilisi-based think tank. I really have a special privilege, especially in these difficult times for Ukraine, to have these webinar discussions. Let me just give a welcome note and then proceed to my colleagues from Kiev. We're extremely delighted that recently we have signed the memorandum for cooperation with the Ukrainian Foreign Policy Association, which is really a meaningful step and meaningful action when the relations between two countries, I'm saying two countries, but not between two nations, is not in a very ideal shape, to put it mildly. So these discussions would be focused on our joint interests. And
Mr. Kipiani disappeared. Yes.
Yeah, so we had. So I was interrupted again. So to continue, we've decided to focus our discussions on the integration of Ukraine and Georgia into the EU, which signifies that our two nations are at a very historical juncture. Let me welcome participants of this webinar discussions. Ambassador Khandohiy, the president for Ukrainian Foreign Policy Association, Ambassador Shpek and Ambassador Dolhov. Let me also welcome my Georgian colleagues, Ambassador Nanobashvili and Mr. Khatiashvili. We have approximately 1 hour and a half to discuss the matter, and I very much hope that these discussions would be of value and a practicable value to the audience, as well as would be a good kickoff on the way for cooperating between Geocase and the Ukrainian Foreign Policy Association. So let me welcome you warm-heartedly. Let me thank you, dear colleagues, for your time. Let me welcome the audience. No surprise that Ukrainian-Georgian relations have always been on the top of the agenda and will remain so. And hopefully our discussions of true professionals and true academicians would contribute to further promoting those bilateral ties. That being said, Ambassador Khandohiy, your welcome notes, and thank you again for all your support and support by your colleagues from Kiev. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to especially thank Viktor Kipiani for his initiative and for his efforts to bring together Ukrainian and Georgian representatives, let me put it this way, of the civil society. I do agree with the notion that the relations between our two countries are not in perfect shape, to put it mildly. But of course, we all recognize and understand the necessity of moving those relations further. And we all remember times when the Ukrainian-Georgian relations were one of those that could be exemplary for the other countries. So I am sure that this modest event that we are having today would open up a good, road for further improvements of our relations. And of course, I would like to briefly introduce people that from the Ukrainian side. I was not up to date about because we expected some more people, but nevertheless, I would like to introduce Ambassador and Professor Gumenyuk, Boris Gumenyuk, who is with us today. I would like to also, and in case when they take the floor, they might expand the introduction by themselves. And we also have with us Professor and Ambassador Koval. We also have, I see, Professor and Ambassador Bersheda with us. Professor Sharov is also with us. Natalia Rilech, who is the very important part of our efforts to, to develop relations with the civil society. She is running courses, and I'm very grateful that she is cooperating closely with the association. We have Volodymyr Yurchenko, so-called, leader of the young wing of the Ukrainian association, and Marina Grigorenko with us. And so I'm maybe we will have some more people, switching in the future as well. So before, so this is the small introduction, but I would like, using this opportunity, to say a few words and bring up several maybe thoughts that can trigger this discussion further. And I would like to begin with saying that today's topic of our discussion is very important and is very pertinent to the situation which is arising in the European, Euro-Atlantic European security environment. The integration of Ukraine and Georgia into the European Union and the new architecture, those two parts of this topic are very closely connected in my mind. That I think, and many experts are mentioning that too, that new architecture of European security is not about inventing new structures or building up something, destroying existing structures and organization and building something new. Yes, we are not very much satisfied with what those organizations are doing now, but I think that the strengthening and new architecture of European security and security, new architecture of European security is more about the membership. It's more about the countries that are participating in this organization. And I would like to mention that in this, against this backdrop, we understand that the membership of Ukraine and Georgia and some other countries of Europe in those organizations would definitely have an impact on the substance of their work. And in this respect, we can say that the membership and the enlargement of those organizations will bring about some new meaning to the activity of those organizations. You know that today it's very popular to say about the notion of inclusion. Everybody wants to do something and include everything into that. And I think that's exactly what it is all about. The membership, it has to do with the membership, the enlargement and expanding of the number of countries that are participating is about the inclusion. And I am sure that this is very topical, that we bring together and link together the EU aspiration of future membership of now two countries in the EU with the new architecture of European security. I will not go into the details. I'm sure that the people will, so to say, will go deeper into this matter. But I can only say that we cannot do without mentioning NATO in this regard, of course, when we speak about the new architecture of the European security. Here we also have this meaning of the inclusion, of inclusiveness, and the membership of Ukraine and Georgia. We would like to hear the current state of affairs about the path of Georgia towards NATO. Be also interesting. Maybe we can devote a special meeting or conference to this issue. But still, I think if we are talking about European security in a broader sense, we can certainly have to mention the possibilities or whatever it is for Georgia to join NATO as well. As far as Ukraine is concerned, you all know that we are on the road to NATO. I don't know how long that road will be, and nobody knows exactly. We all rely on the Washington summit, which will take place this summer. Anyway, talking about European security, we cannot avoid NATO as such and the future enlargement of NATO. And certainly the second part of our discussion today is the, let's say, EU-Georgia and how we can bring together, and work together rather in, covering our road to European Union. I remember, and we all remember, times when we were talking about trio, those three countries that were working together, and if I'm not mistaken, even we formalize that trio in certain documents. That
Yes.
Now this trio, I think it's alive. Basically, maybe we do not have the contacts close enough to say that we are working closely together. And of course, our levels of the closeness of each of our countries, I mean Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, of course, are different today. Ukraine and Moldova, we are having a status. We open up negotiations, but we would be very glad to hear the estimation and evaluation of Georgia on the situation which is now with regard to Georgian membership in the European Union. Those those issues are certainly very interesting and important. We cannot certainly avoid mentioning when we are talking about the European security in the first place, and even when we are talking about the membership of our countries in European Union, we cannot avoid talking about the security environment in Europe, in Ukraine in particular, the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, the full-scale war which is going on, and how it affects all those issues that we will be discussing today. This should be placed in one context, of course, because it has bearing on the path, on the move of Ukraine, in particular, and other countries towards the European Union. So, having said that, I would like to stop here, and I'm sure that we will have a meaningful discussion, fruitful. And finally, I would like to say that maybe at the end of our meeting, we will, or after that, we will think about producing something, summary or a press release about what we've been discussing and what conclusions, if at all, will be reached during our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Khandohiy. You made several very meaningful points. Point number one, as I noted in on my side, that our two nations are geopolitically bound due to common objectives. And thank you so much for raising the topic of associated trio. That was a very meaningful and very important and significant platform for bringing those three pro-EU nations together. You also made a very critical point that integration with EU, it's not just about Georgia and Ukraine, it's also about EU, so it's a two-way street. And I'm always repeating same on my side that we are ready to bring a new vigor and fresh blood and fresh vision as well into the EU, which is on its way of reforming itself. So that is very important. So we're not just the contributor, we're not just the beneficiaries, but we could be potentially the contributors to reforming the European Union. That's something, which we're always saying to our European colleagues here in Georgia. The third point, which you also underlined, that when we speak about the security issue, EU and NATO matters are very strongly interconnected and interrelated, and I expect that Georgian speakers would focus on that interrelation as well. And yes, I take a note about producing some joint summary upon concluding these discussions and disseminating that paper on the Georgian side and on the Ukrainian side. So thank you so much indeed. I would suggest that we start with Ukrainian speaker, then followed by a Georgian speaker, and and proceeding in this way. If we have Ambassador Shpak attending the webinar, Ambassador Shpak, no, we don't.
Unfortunately, we do not have it.
All right.
As far as I can see, I don't know the reason for that. But we can ask Mr. Dolgo maybe to.
Okay, so then
the discussion.
Then Mr. Dolhov was Ambassador Dolhov was serving as the ambassador of Ukraine to Georgia, who has an excellent feeling of the bilateral relations of the Georgian political landscape. But anyway, I mean, Mr. Dolhov or Ambassador Dolhov is always a very much welcome speaker for the Georgian audience. I believe the same goes for the Ukrainian audience. So Ambassador Dolhov, a very warm welcome, appreciation for all you've done on behalf of our two nations. And yes, please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much indeed.
Microphone.
Okay, now it works, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellencies, dear friends, I'm really glad to see some familiar faces and have an opportunity to address you and to develop several issues which are crucially important right now. And well, I will use my privilege as a first speaker, and let me concentrate on security implications rather than on bilateral things or European integration of Georgia and Ukraine. Why I would like to build my speech or my remarks this way? Because I believe that without some fixing some new features and trends, it would be difficult to analyze and to go deeper into detail with the integration of our two countries and Moldova and Balkans too. So where we are now with security, does it exist? Any architecture or any structure, especially if we talk about Europe? Well, Ambassador Khandohiy mentioned that new security is not about a new structure. To some extent, I could agree, but it's not about structures nowadays, because the main architecture or main constructor of security in Europe is, unfortunately, armed forces of Ukraine. This is the main driving force and creator of all possible structures, substructures, tasks, forces, and so on. The main feature of the current situation in Europe is that EU, the organization, covered a huge way from the mostly economic union into active and deeply involved political actor. Nowadays, EU is not only participating in G7, for example, meetings and summits, it takes an active role, bringing not only vision, but concrete and detailed contribution. Let's look back at the recent history. I do not want to dwell into beginning of relations of Ukraine and Georgia with the EU, but let's start with events which led us to the situation where we are now. I would refer to the Russian-Georgian war in 2008. What was that? And what was the reaction of the European Union? We all know that about efforts of, at that time, President of France, Mr. Sarkozy, and so-called peace plan, which never was implemented. So just imagine that in 2008, EU, as an actor, could offer to Georgia, and it's part of the solution to the problem of the Russian-Georgian war, the only thing, Sarkozy plan, and EU mission to Georgia, which still goes on. That's all. That's all. No sanctions on the Russian Federation, no direct involvement, no support to Georgia. Well, some support, that's it. Then the next milestone was 2014 and Russia's occupation of Crimea and proxy war on the east of Ukraine. At that time, the EU moves and reactions were more visible, so to say. So some sanctions have been introduced from Brussels regarding Russia, and some limitations in contacts have been immediately implemented. And since 2014, there is no any discussions, with one exception, about participation of the Russian Federation in G8. G8 doesn't exist anymore. G7 plus EU. So EU became a real member of G7. So in 2014, what was also remarkable that, well, maybe not all of us now could trace this story, but it was very important and remarkable story about two warships, Mistral, built in France for the Russian Federation. It was the first visible and sound move of one of the biggest EU member states against military involvement of the Russian Federation, namely in Ukraine. But still, reaction was limited. And now, finally, we arrived at the point in February 2022, when Russia massively invaded Ukraine. And under the given condition, in this situation, EU proved to be absolutely different actor, not observer, but influencer, donor, and a real force, not only political, but also economic and military. It was for the first time in the history of the European Union that EU gave direct military support to Ukraine, to the country which is at war, what was against previous rules of the European Union. But there is no previous rules. We are in a new situation. So we are in the process of creation of new rules, new principles of game. And unfortunately, this is due to the Russian aggression against Ukraine and this war that players had to move faster and to act more efficiently. Let me remind you also one thing which is important for the European Union. It's already after the beginning of war. Later in 2022, EU adopted so-called strategic compass, a new document for the European Union, which have been created to produce a vision. What should EU do to be prepared for to answer challenges, to accept new realities, and to act swiftly and promptly. And I just opened this document before speaking to you, and again, let me just quote the first point of this quick deployment of EU forces. This document provides for powerful potential of the quick deployment, which is numbered to 5,000 military personnel. And this document had been adopted 2 years ago. 5,000. What does it mean now under the given condition of war in Ukraine? Let me also remind you another thing which characterizes not only EU as it is, but engines of the EU, Germany and France. When war started in Ukraine, Germany, declared that they are ready to supply 5,000 helmets to support Ukrainian army. That's it, 5,000 helmets. And now we are talking about Germany as the main donor for Ukrainian army, and we receive not only battle tanks, but also missiles, and Germany became a leader in the tank coalition in the framework of Ramstein. France headed a coalition of artillery and is ready to provide 78 artillery system Caesar during 1 year. The Netherlands and Denmark, they chaired aviation coalition, and training of Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16 is going on. And we have examples on each and every country. What does it mean? And what is the main conclusion after this introduction? The conclusion is that the European Union became a global player. Not now the ideology of the EU, not about development of partnership with Africa or Latin America or Caribbeans. EU now is about protection and defense of Europe, including involvement in Ukraine. So this is the future. And of course, to be strong and to correspond to new realities, which are unfortunately new, EU have to change itself. So, and if we talk about negotiations about membership of Ukraine and later Georgia in the European Union, we will be a members of the absolutely different European Union. Not even the Union that it was in 2013 when Yanukovych refused to sign an agreement with the EU. Not even EU of 2022, but absolutely different organization, fully aware about the importance of security, fully aware about its responsibility to protect Europe, to protect Union, and to protect people of the EU member states. To become or to move to that aim, EU have to do a lot of things too. Not only to adopt new members as associated trio and Western Balkans and eventually Turkey, but also to change, to implement some internal changes, to be able to cope with internal, well, sometimes problems, sometimes issues, which are already on the table. And unfortunately, we in Ukraine also, to some extent, suffer from these inconveniences and problems, internal problems in the EU. We hope that tomorrow European Council would adopt the decision on long-term plan, finance Ukraine plan. If not, there are other options and solutions. So, and for me, it's also a very strong signal that EU is fully aware of its responsibility. And to support Ukraine is not only about one country in one particular situation. It's about EU as the organization and its future. Especially now, when we look at NATO and the situation in the United States. So, and it is also very sound and topical within the EU that EU must think and get prepared that support and involvement of the United States into European affairs could be weaker and weaker, gradually or in one move. Because the leadership of Trump as a candidate also makes our concerns more serious about the future of transatlantic link, about the US position regarding Ukraine and war and Russian aggression. So there are a lot of things to think over, but it's not about thinking when Ukrainian soldiers are on the front line and they conduct daily fightings, and Ukrainian cities and locations are daily being shelled by our enemy. And at the same time, we discuss about implications, future compositions, architectures. Everything is on the ground, and the price for future security is very high for Ukraine. We sacrifice our people every day and every night. And there is no quick solutions. There is no way out which could be found in one day. Remember and look at the situation again with all plans to support Ukraine. Look at the story with 1 million shells, artillery shells from the EU. Impossible. Why? No money? No, there are money. It's impossible to produce. And in many things, from military defense, it's impossible to increase production as soon as we need it. So, and contracts which have been concluded, signed by NAMSA, NATO's agency, during this year are also good examples about figures, numbers, and ability to protect itself. Patriot missiles for Patriot systems, 1,000 pieces have been contracted by NAMSA in favor of 4 NATO member states, 1,000 pieces. Part of that is this will be supplied to Ukraine. What does it mean for us? 1,000. I don't know. We are not military experts, but we can approximately calculate that one of the latest shelling of Kyiv and Kharkiv during that action, Russia launched 71, if I'm not wrong, 71 missiles. 41 of them, out of them, have been downed. How many pieces of missiles needed to do so? I don't know, but definitely more than 100. So what is 1,000? to compare with one air attack. Not so much. Or artillery shells. Again, NATO contracted 2,200 pieces per year. Again, I mentioned already, EU had to supply to Ukraine 1 million. Can you feel the difference? 1,220,000 over 1 year. I don't know what is daily need of Ukrainian armed forces, but it's much higher to be successful on the battlefield. And we have no other option than to be successful. Because if not, then all our discussions, meetings, and reflections over security structure would mean nothing. So let me stop here, since I'm ready to continue, but as an introduction, I believe that this part, changing the role of the EU at the global politics, at the global scene, is important, especially in terms of our today's topic, Ukraine, Georgia, European integration, and security architecture. Thank you.
Ambassador Dolhov, thank you so much indeed. Actually, we have our own protocol in some time-wise, but of course, you know, we were absolutely free to develop our thinking in course of these discussions as we wish it to be developed. And thank you so much indeed for the very helpful reminders in relation to the security, how the security dynamics have evolved in the region. And thank you for pointing out to the first salvo of revisiting the international order in our part of the world, when mentioning the Russian-Georgian war, and then the whole dynamics with Crimean proxy war in Donbass, and finally full-scale invasion of Russia, reinvasion, I would say, not invasion, but reinvasion, Russia in Ukraine. And you also made very helpful points about how European Union has evolved itself as a security actor. So, and you also, I fully subscribe to what you've said, that when we speak about the future of security design and security landscape in Europe, Ukraine clearly is and will remain as a very significant pillar, the fundamental pillar of that security design. So Ukrainian efforts should be fully appreciated and fully, and expectations of Ukraine in terms of an adequacy and assistance in all the various contributions in terms of increasing the Ukrainian defense and security shall duly be respected, and be respected on a timely basis. Of course, Ambassador Dolhov and distinguished guests, I myself have a few questions. We could have some questions by the audience. But before we proceed to those questions, as a minimum from my side, let me please proceed to the Georgian participants. And it's my special pleasure to present Ambassador Nanobashvili, Ioseb Nanobashvili, who is the regional director for the European Public Law Organization office. And I also have a special privilege to present Ambassador Nanobashvili, because he has kindly agreed to serve as a member of the advisory board of Geocase. An outstanding experience, outstanding knowledge. So Ambassador Nanobashvili, please, we're all intention, and thank you so much for your time.
Mr. Kipiani, dear Victor, thank you very much for warm introductory remarks. Of course, I would like to greet all of you, all participants to this very interesting deliberations. Needless to say that we wish Ukraine fastest possible victory and even faster recovery. progress and prosperity to Ukraine, to Ukrainian people. My intervention I called unexpected enlargement to underline those legal and political reasons and factors behind this unexpected, unprepared development. And of course, in the course of listening to Ambassador Dolhov, I also realized that this is the only wave of EU enlargement which happens against the background of a large-scale war. It's never been the case in the past. So let me focus why this enlargement was unexpected, because there were neither legal nor political reasons for such enlargement, such a decision of the European Union. And let me single out the main factors to back my claim, my statement. From a political point of view, you know that EU was in a lasting and deep fatigue with regards to the enlargement for decades already. Back in 1993, when EU elaborated and introduced EU membership criteria, and then amended it in 1995 in Madrid. In the same documents, EU set a criteria for itself, saying that an applicant country could be ready to enter the Union, to become a member. However, the Union itself could be unprepared to absorb it. And later on, this criteria was called an absorption capacity of the Union. Furthermore, when you started to expand toward Western Balkans, a certain dissatisfaction was expressed by a number of EU member states. Recently, in 2019, for instance, unhappy French state blocked opening of accession negotiations with Northern Macedonia and Montenegro. In 2021, Greece blocked opening of accession negotiations with Albania, and so on and so forth. So the EU was quite unhappy how the enlargement was going on towards Western Balkans, and of course, from political point of view, it was absolutely unprepared to move towards our region. This is for political aspect of this situation. Now, from legal point of view. The situation was even clearer, I would say, because after the Big Bang enlargement of 2004-2007, when EU enlarged by 12 Eastern and South European states, it elaborated a special policy towards its European neighborhood and called it European neighborhood policy. You are all well aware about it. But what has to be underlined that in the very first documents which EU presented with regard to this policy, it highlighted that EU was offering to new neighbors, the EU called us neighbors, new neighbors opportunities which were different from those which the Article 49 of Treaty on EU could offer. So it drew a very clear line that this part of Europe, including Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, could qualify as neighbors only. And the process was absolutely distant from the enlargement track. So from legal point of view, also the European Union was not ready to move towards our region. Furthermore, you also are well aware that EU upgraded its relations with our countries through Eastern Partnership Initiative. It offered truly unique privileges for participant states. Our citizens started to enter EU states visa-free. We launched free trade. We became beneficiaries of important transport, energy, and educational programs, etc., etc. Yet, but still, our relations with the Union were developing within this limited policy, which had no legal and institutional connection with the EU enlargement process. And of course, only after 2022, when Ukraine was attacked by Russia, European Union changed its approach towards our region and offered our countries to submit applications for EU membership. By the way, this was first instance when European states were offered to submit their applications for membership without having any perspective for EU membership, without being EU potential candidates. I will give you a brief comparison to Western Balkans. Well before they applied for EU membership in 2003 at Thessaloniki EU Western Balkan Summit, they already were given this potential candidacy, and later on, this potential candidate status was included in the association and stabilization agreements between the EU and Balkan states. So this was really unexpected, unprepared enlargement, a clear reaction of the European Union towards development in the vicinity of its immediate neighborhood. And of course, because this was unexpected, it's going with some interim and ad hoc decisions with regards to our states. But the good part is that EU acted as a united force, and as Ambassador Dolhov rightly mentioned, EU demonstrated unexpected, again, solidarity, unity, and efficiency. Of course, I also agree with the opinion that EU experiences quite significant problems, internal problems, especially when it comes to a decision-making process. But as I see, as I can observe, EU is going towards more flexible decision-making procedures, and apart from this clause of Treaty on EU, Article 31, which refers to constructive abstention, EU is firmly making steps towards more application and more effective application of the double qualified majority rather than consensus principle. And I'm sure and I hope that steps toward this direction will be more and more meaningful. I will stop here, and I'm ready to take part in further discussions. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Nanobashvili, thank you so much indeed. When I was saying that you're presenting a very unique mix of academia and practical knowledges. Practical knowledge, I was entirely correct in my anticipations. You presented a very helpful insight and observations on the, as you said, absorption capacity of EU, both from the political standpoint and from the legal standpoint. And starting with EU enlargement fatigue, and then you presented clearly enough how EU was stepping out of its own comfort zone, if I may put it this way. So this is really very helpful, and especially my dear Ukrainian colleagues and the Georgian colleagues when we speak about Ukraine and Georgia in the EU and with the EU. We also have to give an analysis not just to what was happening until these days, but what will be happening tomorrow, and that roadmap of reforming the European Union 2030. It's really very unique for us, not just in terms of accommodating ourselves to EU's expectations, but undertaking those required changes and reforms domestically as well, to be the European Union member nation, not just by the letter of the law, but by the spirit as well. And I think, that various hints or emphasizes which you made, Ambassador Nanobashvili, have really very practicable value in that respect. So thank you so much indeed. Let me proceed to the last, but not less significant speaker, Mr. Nikoloz Khatiashvili, who is the chair of the administration at the Parliamentary Committee on the Foreign Relations, and was also an international secretary for Geocase. So, Mr. Khatiashvili, thank you so much indeed. As I understand and I'm aware of that you would be making a significant focus on the role of Georgia in the overall European security architecture and why we matter for EU from that point of view and from different others as well. So, Mr. Khatiashvili, thank you so much indeed for your time, and please go ahead. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for your timely and very important discussion. Actually, since February 2022, we have seen the extraordinary determination of the Ukrainian people as they have defended their homeland. Moreover, we have seen a frustrated Russian military unleashing tremendous amounts of violence on civilians and critical Ukrainian infrastructure. Despite the disinformation spread by Russia, it's clear to all that Putin made a grave miscalculations when he chose to invade sovereign state. In addition, it's clear that millions of young Russians will pay the cost for years to come for an invasion they did not choose. Indeed, for too many will have already paid the ultimate price, I mean Russians. Frankly speaking, Ukraine has also problems. There are challenges that Ukraine is facing, such as lack of resources, postponed US and EU assistance, counter-offensive operations that was not as successful as it was expected, and other various issues. But anyway, Ukraine stands strong and plays a crucial role as a defensive shield for Europe. Ukrainians are fighting, paying the highest price, as our ambassador mentioned, in terms of lives, but this war happens on the European soil, affects Europe and has a global impact around the world, which also affects almost all countries in the region. We understand Georgians, Ukraine best because we experienced it ourselves in 2008. We realize that continuous Western assistance to Ukraine is crucial. Without this assistance, it will be impossible to deter Russia, and the next target can become any of our countries like Georgia, Moldova, and also countries of European Union, which are bordering Russia. It's clear that Russian invasion in Ukraine has turned European security upside down. Despite the fact that Europe has faced a number of crises in recent years, such as, for example, failed constitutional treaty, the sovereign debt crisis, migration, climate change, Brexit, nationalist populism, the pandemic, and so on, we still thought that Europe was resilient, but Russian invasion changed the whole landscape. It became clear that Europe has also many vulnerabilities, such as energy security and trade. This was revealed at the very beginning of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, when Europe was not so bold in its decisions regarding Ukraine's assistance, regarding Ukraine's military assistance. We saw that it took several weeks to send the first packages of the military assistance to Ukraine. This behavior from European Union has several explanations. However, as we are talking about Georgian context, I will focus more on energy security and trade. As you know, before the Russian invasion, a big part of Europe was dependent on Russian energy resources, which granted Russia influence rule over Europe for years. Many people probably do not remember 2009 energy crisis, when Russia indirectly, using Ukraine, stopped supplying gas to Europe for several days or week or something like that. This crisis became a trigger for talks inside Europe about the importance of alternative energy supply chains bypassing Russia. There were also many ideas of new energy routes and so on. But unfortunately, this issue was soon forgotten by everyone. And moreover, working on Nord Stream 2 has been started in an active phase. The Russian invasion of Ukraine finally showed Europe the real challenges and needs to ensure security. It should be mentioned that Europe, along with other issues, has finally given a big importance to strengthening energy security and reducing dependence on Russia, which is very important for Europe's future security. On the one hand, Europe tries to develop renewable energy, and on the other hand, tries to establish alternative energy supply chains bypassing Russia. In this context, one of the primary factors highlighting Georgia's importance is its role as a crucial energy corridor. The middle corridor, so-called a network of pipelines and infrastructure, facilitating the transportation of natural gas from Caspian and Central Asia region to Europe, passes through Georgia, as you know, and this increases the role of Georgia as a regional player. By diversifying energy routes and reducing dependence on single suppliers, Georgia can contribute significantly to the energy security of European nations. This only not enhancing resilience against potential disruptions, but also fosters a more secure and interconnected energy landscape. Georgia's, I will also mention that Georgia's steadfast commitment to Euro-Atlantic integration is another key aspect of its importance for European security. As a NATO aspirant and the EU candidate state, Georgia actively pursues political, economic, and military cooperation with these institutions. This alignment strengthens the collective security architecture for Europe, fostering a sense of unity and shared values among nations. Georgia's integration into these institutions enhances the overall stability, especially in the EU, enhances the overall stability and security of the continent. In addition, the Black Sea region, where Georgia's coastline resides, has gained prominence as a strategic area with implications for European security. The Black Sea serves as a link between Europe and Caucasus. It historically serves as a link. And Georgia's active participation in regional security initiatives, including mediation and facilitation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, bolsters cooperation in addressing common challenges. By promoting stability and collaboration in the Black Sea, Georgia contributes to a secure European periphery. And once again, this factor also increases the importance of Georgia for the European Union. Also, planned projects such Anaklia port, which is planned to be built in upcoming years, will grant Georgia's additional importance as an interconnector for Europe and Asia. And when we speak about supply chains, along with the new electricity cable, which will connect Europe with Georgia and strengthens Europe's energy security. Also, I would like to focus on Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway project, which is an additional part of connectivity, and it enables fast transportation of goods from China to Europe through Georgia. In conclusion, Georgia's geographical location, role as an energy transit hub, commitment to Europe-Atlantic integration, also an active engagement in regional security efforts, collectively positioning it as an, how to say, it's like linchpin in shaping the future of European architecture. As Europe faces evolving challenges, Georgia's multi-faceted contributions are integral to fostering a secure and interconnected continent. Finally, I would say that what the Germans have called the Zeitenwende, in fact, is Zeitenwende not only for Germany, but for the whole Europe. Europe realized that enlargement is a key. Europe is a key to European security, especially when we speak about the Black Sea region, which is becoming arena for competitions between the global powers. And the importance of towards the region is increasing, and Europe must not lose this momentum and make pragmatic and strategic decisions which will make positive consequences in long-term perspective for European security. Here, I think I will stop, and I'm ready for the questions. And once again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Khatiashvili. Again, several important highlights which have to be reflected in that summary paper which Ambassador Khandohiy has mentioned at the start of our conversation when you spoke about the European security. And when we're saying that it's not just about us taking from them, but us giving to them as well. You very helpfully mentioned two pillars of the European security, which is about energy and the transport infrastructure, and how much we from Georgian side are underpinning that picture and that security system. You also mentioned necessarily, and I think that's something which we have to focus with our esteemed colleagues from the association on the Black Sea and Black Sea importance for bringing our two nations together, for realigning their security and non-security interests. And yeah, you pointed out middle corridor with its various ramifications. And thank you for mentioning Zeitenwende by European Union. And this is probably something where I would start my Q&A section of this conversation. We have 20 minutes left based on the protocol. Since I don't have so far questions by the audience, so let me proceed with 2 or 3 questions from my side. And I would, Ambassador Khandohiy, please, you raise the hand.
Yes, thank you very much. I do have a question, and I would like to put it for the distinguished speakers in the first place and for any other participants to this discussion. You mentioned, I think Ambassador Dolhov mentioned, you yourself, Victor, have mentioned that European Union today is different from, I mean, presumably, from the European Union to which Ukraine and Georgia will become a member. And certainly we know that there are ongoing discussions now what shape European Union will have in the future. And one of the issues that is being discussed that probably the way out is that countries, applicant countries, or those even who open up negotiations in the near future, like Ukraine and Moldova, will be admitted to European Union step by step, partly. I mean, as soon as any one country will fulfill chapter, so certain, something will be offered to that country without admitting this country as a total to the European Union, something like that. So, in other words, it's like half membership, which can be offered to countries. I would like to ask if there is any thoughts on that issue. I know that from our side, from Ukraine, Minister Kuleba at one point said that we are not very happy about this process if it will take place. And certainly we will be not happy with the notion of half membership. So I would like to ask whether there are any comments on that issue. Thank you.
Indeed, I mean, just a small intervention. It reminds me about not very probably nice joke about self-pregnancy. So there is no self-democracy, there is no semi-democracy, and there is no semi-freedom. So it's really out of curiosity, and not just out of curiosity, but because of a very, very practicable consideration, to ask those people who are advocating for semi or quasi membership what that means essentially. But thank you for this comment, because again, I'm always of the opinion that of course we are very much aspiring to become members of the European Union, but at the same time we should be critical to ourselves, and we should be critical to our European partners as well. So that being said, dear speakers, anyone would like to comment? Ambassador Nanobashvili, I see that you're ready to make your comment, please. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. Well, how I see this process is that, of course, in the course of this enlargement, in parallel, the European Union also evolves, and it changes methods and approaches to certain issues which are related to the EU enlargement. For instance, in 2020, you elaborated a new approach, a new methodology of accession negotiations, and it regrouped the topics which are in this Acquis Communautaire 35 chapters. So at the same time, you made it clear that there will be no shortcuts, and the accession negotiations should go in accordance with the EU law. So each and every chapter will be opened with the consent of all EU member states, implemented, reviewed by the Commission, and closed again by the agreement of all EU member states. And now it's up to acceding countries to close those chapters as soon as possible. Of course, I expect that some privileges and some concessions might be applied toward Ukraine, because this country is in a special situation, and of course the level of and the standard in each and every chapter would be much difficult to achieve when a state is at war. However, you made it clear that there will be no shortcuts. And of course, I have a great hope that our nations, our states, will be in a position to mobilize all its resources, its academic, political, and social resources to engage into this process in full strength and in full capacity. That would be my reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Anyone else to comment?
Yeah.
Ambassador Dolhov, please. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me add something concerning future EU shape, what I expect to change itself, what we expect as Ukraine, as a new member, from the new EU as a body, which we will be a part of. So what do we see now, and what war in Ukraine demonstrated? Which manifestations within EU provoke concerns, disputes, discussions, and so on? There are several points. The first one is decision-making. And that is why the decision wasn't taken in December concerning formation of fund for Ukraine, and only on the 1st of February, European Council will get again to discuss the issue. Why? Because the lack of consensus, because of position of several or one member state, and it's again another manifestation that the European Parliament, when decided to recommend EU to change the system of decision making in favor to somehow to deviate from consensus in all cases, it's on the top of the agenda. And it is even more important if the number of EU members will become bigger, higher. Secondly, it's a consolidation of positions, because with all respect to particular interest of each and every EU member states, still there is and will be stronger common foreign and security policy within the EU. And war in Ukraine demonstrated that this common policy should be more consistent and more efficient. To be more efficient, we need more understanding among EU, first of all, and with understanding with partner countries, with future members, for example, Georgia and Ukraine. In case of, well, we know in EU, there are several member states have a bit different vision on ways of assisting Ukraine. For example, Austria, which is neutral state by constitution, is cautious about any kind of support which could be considered as military support or double use purpose. Hungary, you know, it's about itself and its position. Poland and the situation on the Ukrainian-Polish border over the end of the year, and some problems on the borders with Hungary and Slovak Republic demonstrates that not only decision-making within the EU, but also implementation of decisions and regulations should be somehow modified in order to be more effective. Because what Polish farmers, or let's put it bluntly, Polish one political party provoked protests on the border, it's against regulations and norms of the European Union. And some other issues which are also a subject not only for discussions but to decision making. In case of Georgia, as a future member, we also observed some positions and some decisions which we couldn't understand 100% in Ukraine. For example, air flights between Moscow and Georgia. It was something that we didn't expect. And even while in Georgia, when I was there, I thought that it's a very logical step from Kremlin that they will lift their limitations which have been imposed on Georgia. And then you will have a problem. You didn't have a problem internally, but you in Georgia had a kind of, not fully understandable situation with your European partners. Or, for example, trade. You mentioned, or previous speaker mentioned, that Georgia is important in terms of energy and transit. Yes, of course. But it also relevant, this point is relevant to your trade relations with the Russian Federation. The only country with which Georgia increased turnover over the year 2023 is the Russian Federation among all partners. I understand, and I do believe that you have more reasons, and I had long discussions when still I was in Georgia, but it's a kind of questions which would all the time put on the agenda of not only bilateral relations between Ukraine and Georgia, but also regarding your future negotiations with the European Union. So Black Sea, of course, it's a key factor, and in terms of geopolitical importance of Georgia and its future, so to say, contribution to the EU and regarding transportation on Black Sea. But you mentioned seaport of Anakle. The construction is suspended, and the company which started to construct this deep water seaport had been, I don't know, expelled from Georgia. And what I learned recently, end of the year 2023, when Abkhazia, separatists Abkhazia, decided and signed a kind of arrangement with the Russian Federation to grant the seaport of Ochamchira to deploy Russian military fleet, I didn't see strong protests in Georgia from the outset. Yes, later, of course, there were reactions from, even from the parliament, and initially parliament avoided any moves to evaluate the situation and to make a statement. So there are, yes, some points and some problems which, sooner or later should be sorted out and put clearly on your political agenda. We do not expect, at least I do not expect, any significant changes in internal changes in Georgia and regarding the yesterday's resignment of Prime Minister Nanobashvili. I believe that until elections in Georgia this fall, we shouldn't and we cannot, there are no grounds to expect any major changes. And I just hope and wish you all the best in Georgia to implement all points which have been raised by the European Commission in order to make its to speed up at the beginning of negotiations about your membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Dolhov. Thank you for your very interesting remarks. I have an understanding. Yes, I agree with you that there have been various acrimonious statements from each side, regretfully enough, but still I have an impression that we, at this point, with the Georgian participants, we did not arrive to the prosecution office, but we're speaking with our good colleagues. So, and since this is a very fast contact between us, I really want to set a very healthy pattern. Of course, we have to focus on those issues as well, but this time I would be very much grateful, since this is an inauguration of our discussions at the background of quite tense political communications. We have to provide with a good example. We have to set a good pattern, and I would very much encourage, with all my responsibility, or the same responsibility, to tweak the topic of our discussions to be confined to the integration with the EU. Of course, you know, it goes without some domestic implications, but again, I think that we should, in the course of discussions, we should position ourselves as a responsible contributors to the discussions. But anyway, I take the note of your remarks, and thank you again for raising them. But I would, with the Georgian side, would refrain from making our comments on various exotic statements by various Ukrainian officials when it comes to domestic affairs and domestic matters of Georgia, because of that pattern and because of that responsibility which Geocase and the Ukrainian Association for Foreign Policy takes on its shoulders in the framework of this partnership. Well, thank you so much, and for your understanding. Two questions which I have, and we're nearing the end of the discussions. Dear colleagues, are we agree that, or let me put in this in a different way? When Georgia was granted the candidacy status, there have been big discussions on the Georgian side whether it was entirely merit-based decision, or let's say, you know, tainted by some geopolitical cause. You, the Ukrainians, and I'm asking that your discretion most candidly and very naively, if I may. In course of negotiations with the European Union, do you expect, let's say, you know, some geopolitical inclinations by the EU? I'm not speaking about special favors to Ukraine because of its really special role these days, not just for Ukraine, but for Georgia and for the entire Europe. But do you expect some sort of, you know, some deviations from the merit-based approach because of the war in Ukraine, that more leniency, let's put it this way, and more accommodation would be demonstrated by the European institutions because of geopolitical considerations? So if anyone would like to comment, your Ambassador Khandohiy or anyone else, or your Ambassador Dolhov, thank you so much for your any comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. Honestly, neither I nor my colleagues, I am sure, were, you know, in the process of the negotiations, and so we cannot really accept, or I mean, to disagree with what you just said. But I assume, I understand that the act of aggression that Ukraine got from Russian Federation, the war itself, certainly had an impact on the path and on the speed of our integration to NATO. But here I would like to mention that, and that goes along the lines that you have mentioned, whether or not there was a geopolitical sort of context for our accession of the current state of affairs between Ukraine and the EU. Certainly there is a geopolitical context. And I remember, and we all remember, I think it was Zbigniew Brzezinski that said that there is no security in Europe at large unless and if Ukraine will be part of the current or modern Europe, including its structures. So I think that finally, maybe, and given the fact that EU, as Ambassador Dolhov mentioned, now is turning more towards the not only economic side but also to the political and geopolitical context. In the EU, they have understood that it's a high time for Ukraine to be part of the European Union if European Union wants to play a role and ensure the security in Europe. So I think this connotation is there, and the way of thinking is also there. And I don't evaluate this decision in terms of if there is no war, for instance, it's a hypothetical situation, what the status of Ukraine would be with regard to our membership in the European Union. But I understand, and all of us know that since very beginning, since the beginning of independence, Ukraine always was fighting politically, of course, for the idea that Ukraine belongs not only to Europe geographically, but also to the European structures, including European Union and NATO.
Thank you, Ambassador Khandohiy. Ambassador Dolhov, any comments? No or no on this issue?
No,
Okay.
thank you. It's okay. I just wanted to call both organizations to continue such very practical and very interesting discussions in the future, not only limiting itself for the European integration, but also trying to maybe to enlarge our field of interest, including energy security, including maritime transportation. There are many interesting topics. So I am always will be glad to join and to participate in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador. So one final question to wrap up. And this is the question to every speaker. On this path of integration with the European Union, although we realize that Ukraine is slightly ahead, you started negotiations, we have not started them yet, but hopefully would be able to open by end of this year. We'll see, fingers crossed. Could we just from top of our head think of some joint efforts in terms of either positioning our interests or advocating for our interests, or in terms of communication policies when speaking with EU structures or EU member nations? Any suggestions, even if those suggestions could be rough at this point? Ambassador Khandohiy, please.
It's from the top of my head.
Of course,
I don't represent this as an official position, but if there is one issue that could bring closer Georgia and Ukraine and help to overcome existing problems, whatever you call them, this is the European integration. And my sort of suggestion, whatever, is let us, maybe at the beginning from the civil society, let us look back or rather go back to the idea of association trio. Okay. And to reflect again, to remind people again that there was and still is a trio. Yeah, there is different speed now, but because I believe and I know from the history of the European Union that enlargements normally is done by a number of countries. It's not a solo. It's an effort, and it's certainly more easier. No, I mean not easier, but I mean to go more helpful to have the countries, like-minded countries, to go together to and together, because the waves of enlargement, as we all know, were done by certain groups of countries. So let's maybe think about revitalizing the idea of the association trio.
I completely agree with you, and picking up on what Ambassador Dolhov said, the associated trio or some joint platforms could be among the subject for our future discussions as well, in terms of our concrete or specific suggestions or recommendations how to instrumentalize those platforms. So, Ambassador Nanobashvili, you have a comment, and then probably final comment by Mr. Khatiashvili, and then we will end up this conversation. Ambassador Nanobashvili, please.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly reflect what has been said by Ambassador. Well, even this association trio was formalized from only our sides, our states, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. They formalized it by issuing a joint declaration of Batumi, if I'm not mistaken, which never been recognized by US and official institution. Even within the Eastern Partnership Initiative, the approach of the EU was purely on merit-based, and it assessed each and every participant of this policy in accordance to its performance. And it will, to a large extent, will be applied in the accession process. In this process, every country is by its own. It has to demonstrate good performance in priority areas. EU will start with fundamentals. This is a group of topics related to rule of law, financial control, corruption, etc., etc. So in this process, of course, everything depends on each and every state how they perform. I also kindly disagree with the ambassador, because in the past there were instances when EU enlarged by one state only. I may recall Greece and Croatia, for instance, they joined separately. What I'm trying to underline is that everything depends on Georgia, on Ukraine. Of course, in the course of accession negotiations with Ukraine, I expect some concessions, as I said, and some deviations from the regular procedures, because Ukraine is not in a regular situation. And of course, but again, it will be really, really hard to convince all 27 member states to close the chapter unless a meaningful progress is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Nanobashvili. So, Mr. Khatiashvili, your final remark, please. Thanks.
Yes, I just want to mention two issues. First is Anaklia Port. Ambassador mentioned that Anaklia Port, building of Anaklia Port suspended, but the reality is a little bit different. According to the latest decision of Georgian government, government will become co-investor of this port, and government will the owner of this port by 51%, and it will build this part of the port, and also two international companies are interested in investing to this port, and I suppose that next soon one of these two companies will be winners in this process, and the building process will start. Another issue regarding the Georgia's European integration, actually this is a very complex issue and requires consideration in several dimensions, but very briefly, this process depends on three main factors. The first factor is successful implementation, and I will say successful closing of the European Union's chapters, which means implementing reforms in various sectors. We must realize that some reforms are painful and have a direct impact on the daily life of Georgian citizens. But if we agree that we want to become members of the European Union, then in short term, every citizen should support these changes in order to achieve the ultimate goal of making everyone's life much easier and better by becoming a member of the European Union. This process must be very inclusive, with participation of government, opposition, political parties, NGOs, and ordinary citizens. If these reforms and these chapters will be closed successfully and all required obligations will be fulfilled, then there will no longer be any formal preconditions that would hinder our EU membership. Another obstacle and challenge is the security situation in the region. The current international setting poses a significant threat to the countries like Georgia. In the unfortunate event of even minimal progress for Russia in Ukraine and outcomes that no one wishes for, Georgia could potentially be the next target. Georgia stands as the last democratic nation in the post-Soviet region, actively advancing towards European and Euro-Atlantic institutions, and the closer Georgia gets to the European Union, the more active Russia will be against Georgia and will use various provocations to destabilize countries. Russia understands that destabilization in the country will suspend our integration process. So therefore, it's vital to take cautious and prudent steps in order to, in the upcoming years, in order to successfully conduct the EU negotiations and integration process. And the third one is the last one is EU's geopolitical readiness for enlargement. Russia's invasion in Ukraine has clearly shown Europe the real threats. It's important that the general approach towards security has radically changed in Europe, and the enlargement is considered as a key tool for European security architecture. The main thing is that this readiness for enlargement must be permanent and should be strengthened, for which Georgia must work actively and show the European Union that our country is ready for membership. I can't agree that trade with Russia can be an obstacle for European integration, because European Union own trades with Russia till now, and I don't think that it can become a main obstacle for this. If this situation will be maintained by 2030, I mean geopolitical readiness of European Union for enlargement, I suppose that there will not be any political prerequisite for Georgia to an obstacle to become a member of the European Union. If all these three factors will be fulfilled, then I do not see any obstacle for Georgia to become a full member of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. So Ambassador Dolhov and Mr. Khatiashvili teamed up in reminding all of us that there's still some controversies in bilateral relations, and that makes our platform even more interesting. We will be looking forward to discuss those issues in depth. But more importantly, not to speak very pathetically, these discussions have again sent a very good message. How we missed, soft language discussions and constructive discussion. So I think, in that respect, we did a good job today in sending sound and well-qualified messages. And one of those messages also, why I mentioned that united we are, stronger we are. We're bound by historically, we're bound geoeconomically, we're bound geopolitically. And in that context, let me thank you, my dearest colleagues, from the Ukrainian Association for Foreign Policy, and in the first instance, Ambassador Khandohiy, Ambassador Dolhov, all the members of these discussions. And thank you so much indeed. We very much look forward, dear friends and colleagues, to continuing those discussions. And as a conclusion, let me, on this very specific occasion, say the very famous world motto, which is not just about Ukraine, but which unites all of us against the evil forces. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава.
Oh, great.
We'll sure keep in touch, and thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Дякую.
Mr. Kipiani, thank you very
Thank you
much
very
for
much.
excellent moderating of the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Victor Kipiani. We will stay in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.